The courtroom lights were blinding, bouncing off polished oak tables and the glint of my sister's diamond bracelet. She leaned back in her chair, lips curved into that smug little smile she always wore when she thought she had already won. The judge hadn't spoken yet. My family filled the benches behind us, whispering, some shaking their heads at me. To them, I was the ungrateful one, the selfish one, the sister who wouldn't step up anymore. My sister shifted in her seat, rubbing her swollen belly, her 5th pregnancy. The attorney she'd dragged in flashed me a grin, already counting victory in his eyes. In that moment, it looked like everything was stacked against me. But what they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I wasn't the same tired pushover they'd been taking advantage of for years. I had proof. I had allies. And I had a plan. They thought this would break me, but they had no idea what was coming. Growing up, my life always seemed to orbit around my sister, Caroline. She was the shining star, the golden child, the one everyone rushed to protect, no matter how reckless she became. I was the quiet one, the dependable one, the one who stayed home, who cooked dinner, who helped our mother fold laundry when she was too tired to stand. But dependable doesn't get you praise. It gets you silence. Silence and more responsibility. By the time I turned 23, Caroline had already given birth to 2 children. 2 different fathers, both gone before the baby's first birthdays. And every time, it was me who picked up the slack. I was the one who rocked crying infants at 3 a.m. while Caroline snuck out to parties. I was the one who bought diapers when she spent her last paycheck on clothes. At first, I told myself it was temporary. She just needs time to grow up. I whispered into the dimly lit nursery, holding her baby girl against my chest. But time kept passing, and nothing changed. Our mother, God bless her, always excused it. She's sensitive, she'd say. She's been through a lot. Be patient with her, but patient turned into exploited. By the time Caroline announced her 3rd pregnancy, I'd already given up most of my 20s. My evenings were a blur of formula bottles, laundry piles, and school permission slips signed in my name instead of hers. I had my own job at the library, steady but not glamorous, and I barely had energy left for myself. Yet my mother and extended family treated it as though my sacrifices were simply expected, as though my life was somehow less important. The neighborhood wasn't blind either. Mrs. Thompson, our elderly neighbor, would often watch me wrangling the kids into the car. She'd shake her head and mutter, "That sister of yours sure has it easy." I never answered. What could I say? Caroline, meanwhile, thrived in her role as victim queen. She'd walk into family dinners late, holding one child while the others trailed behind her like ducklings, and everyone would leap up to help her. She wore chaos like a crown, and somehow she always spun the story to make herself look fragile, burdened, deserving of everyone's sympathy. I remember one night in particular. It was Thanksgiving. The table glowed under warm light, every dish steaming with care. I had cooked most of it myself, turkey, stuffing, even the pie. As everyone gathered, my uncle raised his glass for a toast. "To Caroline," he said with a proud smile, "for being such a strong mother. We don't know how you do it." Laughter and applause rippled across the table. Carolyn beamed, soaking it in, while I sat frozen with the carving knife still in my hand. No one acknowledged that I had baked, basted, cleaned, and wrangled her kids just so she could stroll in looking unbothered. That was the first sting. The first cut deep enough to scar. I remember gripping the knife tighter, not in anger but in realization. In that moment, I understood that my role in this family wasn't daughter or sister. It was caretaker, placeholder, shadow, and shadows don't get thanked. Still, I endured. I told myself it wasn't worth the fight, that keeping the peace was more important than speaking up, but endurance only stretches so far before it snaps. I didn't know it then, But Caroline was already planning her fourth announcement. And when that came, it wouldn't just sting. It would tear open every wound I had tried to bandage over the years. Caroline's fourth pregnancy announcement didn't arrive at a family dinner or holiday. No, she preferred spectacle. She posted a glossy photo on Facebook, her hand cradling her stomach, the caption reading, "Miracle number 4 coming soon. God gives his hardest battles to his strongest soldiers." Within minutes, comments poured in. "You're amazing, Caroline. Such a devoted mother. You're truly blessed." My phone buzzed with every notification, each one a slap across my face. I wasn't tagged. I wasn't mentioned. But I knew, deep down, that behind the screen, everyone assumed I'd be stepping in once again. Babysitter, taxi driver, financial safety net. At first, I stayed quiet. I told myself not to react. But silence doesn't protect you when someone else is controlling the story. Caroline started planting little seeds, whispering to our mother that I was cold, that I didn't support family the way I used to. She'd make snide remarks at gatherings, loud enough for cousins and aunts to overhear. Some people think they're too good to help anymore. Guess responsibility isn't for everyone. And of course, my family ate it up. I could feel the tide shifting. Suddenly my phone rang less. Invitations to dinners stopped arriving. When I did show up, conversations quieted. My mother, once my quiet ally, started asking sharp questions. Why can't you just help her more? She's your sister. The weight pressed heavier every day. At work, I couldn't focus. My hands trembled as I shelved books. My chest tightened with anxiety whenever my phone buzzed, always afraid it was another demand, another accusation. Nights stretched long. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, the echoes of Caroline's words replaying in my head until I felt sick. Exhaustion seeped into my bones. My body began to betray me. Dark circles pooled under my eyes, my hair thinned, and I felt a constant ache in my shoulders, as if carrying invisible chains. One night, I broke. Caroline had dropped her kids off unannounced, thrusting backpacks into my hands with a breezy, "You don't mind, right?" "I have plans." She didn't wait for an answer. Hours later, while her children slept on my couch, I sat in the kitchen staring at the glowing clock. Midnight. My head pounded. My chest felt hollow. That was when I whispered out loud, for the first time, "I can't do this anymore." But the walls didn't answer. The silence felt suffocating. The next day, something unexpected happened. I was at the grocery store, pushing a cart half full of basics I could barely afford, when Mrs. Thompson, the same elderly neighbor who used to watch me corral the kids, stopped me in the aisle. She placed a carton of eggs in her basket, glanced at me, and said softly, "You look tired, dear." Tired in a way sleep won't fix. I didn't know why, but my throat closed up. Tears burned behind my eyes. Before I could respond, she reached out and touched my arm. Her hand was light but steady. "You know, you don't have to carry her choices. They're not your burden." I froze. No one had ever said it so plainly. For the first time in years, I felt something crack, not despair, but the faintest spark of hope. And as I walked away from that aisle, clutching my cart like a lifeline, a thought grew louder in my mind. Maybe I wasn't as alone as Caroline wanted me to believe. Caroline always knew how to play the crowd, but this time she went bigger. She called a family meeting. It was a rainy Saturday when my mother phoned. "Be at the house at 6. Caroline has something important to discuss." The dread pooled in my stomach instantly. I knew what it was. Still, I went, because not showing up would only feed her story that I was selfish. The living room was packed when I arrived. Aunts, uncles, cousins, faces lined up like jurors. Caroline sat at the center of it all, her hair perfectly curled, a silk blouse draped over her growing belly. She looked like a queen on her throne, basking in sympathy. When the chatter died down, she launched into her speech. "As you all know, I'm expecting again." And it's been hard, really hard. Her voice cracked just enough to sound believable. I'm doing this alone. The kids deserve stability, and I just can't do it all myself. Murmurs of agreement filled the room. I clenched my fists. Then came the dagger. I think it's only fair, she said, glancing directly at me, that my sister helps out more. After all, she doesn't have a family of her own. She has time. She has space. The kids adore her. My stomach dropped. Gasps, nods. Some even clapped. My mother wiped a tear from her eye, whispering, "She's right. The children need you." Caroline leaned back, smug satisfaction curling her lips. She thought she'd cornered me, boxed me in with the pressure of blood, tradition, and guilt. I sat frozen, the weight of every eye pressing down on me. My heart raced, palms damp, but then a different feeling stirred, a flicker of steel. I cleared my throat, the room falling silent. I've been raising her kids for years, I said evenly. My voice didn't shake. Buying groceries, driving to appointments, staying up through sickness, and I've never once been thanked for it. The silence cracked like glass. Caroline's smile faltered. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder I'd been keeping quietly. Receipts, medical bills, school permission slips, all with my name signed. Evidence, proof. I spread them across the coffee table like cards in a game. This is what I've contributed. Thousands of dollars, hundreds of hours, and not a word of credit. If anyone here thinks I haven't done enough, look closely. Murmurs rippled again, but this time they sounded different. Confused, uneasy. My uncle leaned forward, brows knitting. My cousin shifted in her seat. Caroline's face flushed crimson. "That's not the point," she snapped. "Family isn't about keeping score. It's about stepping up when you're needed." I leaned back, folding my arms. Funny. Family didn't seem to need me until you started making choices you couldn't manage. Choices you never took responsibility for. Her eyes flashed, but beneath the anger, I saw something else. Panic. For the first time, she didn't look untouchable. She looked rattled, but she recovered quickly, standing up and throwing her shoulders back. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "If you won't stand with me, you're against me. And I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are." She stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls rattled. The room buzzed with awkward whispers, but no one chased her. I gathered my papers calmly, sliding them back into the folder. My hands were still shaking, but not from fear. This time, it was adrenaline. They thought they still had control, I thought, watching the shocked faces around me. They didn't. That night, I went home exhausted but strangely lighter. For once, I had drawn a line, and though I didn't know it yet, Caroline wasn't going to back down. She was going to escalate. And the war was only just beginning. Caroline didn't waste time after that family meeting. Within days, the whispers started. At the grocery store, I caught two cousins by the dairy aisle, their voices dropping when I walked past. At work, a mutual acquaintance stopped me and said, "I heard you abandoned your sister when she needed you most." Even at church, I felt eyes on me, pitying looks mixed with judgment. Caroline was spinning her web, and she was good at it. Every rumor dripped with just enough truth to sound convincing. She didn't deny I'd helped her before. She just twisted it. "She used to help," she'd sigh, "but now she thinks she's too good for us." She left me alone with all these kids, and people believed her. The isolation grew heavier. Invitations stopped entirely. My phone buzzed only when Caroline needed to gloat. Screenshots of supportive comments. Photos of her surrounded by smiling relatives who no longer spoke to me. But instead of collapsing under it, something hardened inside me. I started keeping records. Not just receipts, but text messages, voicemails, every detail of every time she dumped responsibility on me. I bought a cheap file box from the office supply store, labeled it Caroline Evidence, and filled it piece by piece. It sat in the corner of my bedroom like a silent ally. Every time I looked at it, I reminded myself, I wasn't crazy. I wasn't weak. I wasn't alone in this story. The symbolic folder became my anchor, proof that I had worth, even if my family refused to see it. Still, the pressure gnawed at me. Caroline wasn't just recruiting relatives. She went further. She filed a complaint with Child Services, claiming my apartment was unsafe for her children. The investigator showed up unannounced, clipboard in hand. My heart nearly stopped. But after a full inspection, the truth came out. My place was spotless, stocked with food, safe. The investigator closed the case, leaving me shaken but stronger. Caroline's lies had almost worked, but this time, facts saved me. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, the file box open in front of me, and whispered, I won't let her destroy me. I also started making changes for myself. I went to therapy for the first time in my life, spilling years of exhaustion and guilt to a stranger who didn't judge me. I began jogging at dawn, letting the cold air clear my head. Slowly, my body grew stronger, my mind steadier. Meanwhile, Caroline's cracks began to show. She overplayed her hand, leaning harder on people who were already stretched thin. One by one, her allies started to hesitate. My aunt, who once praised her endlessly, confided in me quietly, She's been asking me for money every week. I can't keep it up, I just nodded, storing it away. The war wasn't over, but the balance was shifting. And through it all, that file box grew heavier, stuffed with truths she couldn't erase. One evening, as I closed it with a satisfying snap, I thought, the day of reckoning is coming, and no one can stop it. The showdown came sooner than I expected. Caroline had pushed too far, again. This time she filed a petition in family court, requesting financial guardianship support from me, claiming I had a moral obligation to care for her children. When I read the notice, my hands went numb. Court. It felt unreal, like stepping into a nightmare I couldn't wake from. But then I glanced at the file box in the corner of my room, swollen with evidence, and for the first time, I didn't feel fear. I felt ready. The courtroom was cold, the air humming with fluorescent lights. Rows of benches stretched behind us, filled with relatives who had come to watch. Caroline sat at the petitioner's table, her belly draped in another flowing blouse, her lawyer whispering in her ear. She looked radiant, confident, as though the judge's gavel had already swung in her favor. When the proceedings began, Caroline played her role to perfection. Tears shimmered in her eyes as she spoke. I've done everything I can, Your Honor. But I'm alone. My sister refuses to help. My children are suffering because of her selfishness. Gasps rippled through the room. My mother shook her head in disappointment. My cousins glared at me like I was a criminal. The judge turned to me. Do you have a response? I stood slowly, smoothing my hands against my skirt. My heart thundered, but my voice came steady. Yes, Your Honor. I do. I lifted the file box and placed it on the table with a heavy thud. The sound echoed in the silent courtroom. Then I opened it. Piece by piece, I laid out the truth. Receipts of groceries bought with my own paycheck. Medical bills I had covered. School slips signed in my name. Text messages from Caroline demanding babysitting at all hours. Even the Child Services report declaring my home safe and her claims unfounded. As I spread the papers across the table, the energy in the room shifted. The whispers quieted. My relatives leaned forward, their faces paling. Caroline's mask began to crack. Her smile twitched. She gripped the edge of the table so tightly her knuckles turned white. She's lying, she shouted, her voice breaking. She fabricated all of that. But the judge had already picked up one of the receipts, studying it carefully. This is her signature, he said firmly, repeatedly. The silence was deafening. Caroline's lawyer leaned away from her, his face stiff with discomfort. My mother pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. I took a breath and spoke, my voice calm but sharp as glass. I have never abandoned family. I have sacrificed my time, money, and health to raise children who were not mine. And instead of gratitude, I have been smeared, humiliated, and dragged here today as if I'm the villain. I won't carry that burden anymore. Caroline shook her head violently, her tears no longer delicate but desperate. She's trying to ruin me. She's jealous. But her words sounded hollow now, empty. The judge set the papers down with finality. Petition denied. Furthermore, Ms. Caroline, I strongly suggest you reevaluate the way you've used this courtroom. A sharp gasp escaped her lips. Her empire, her illusion of power, crumbled in front of everyone. I looked at her then, not with anger, but with clarity. I don't want apologies, I said softly. I want change. The words hung in the air like a verdict. Caroline's shoulders sagged. Her face, once smug and radiant, collapsed under the weight of her unraveling lies. For the first time in years, I felt taller, freer, whole. After court, the silence between my family and me stretched like a canyon. No one rushed to my side as we filed out of the courtroom. No one hugged me. But for once, I didn't ache for their approval. I walked past them with my head high, the file box tucked under my arm. That box wasn't just evidence anymore. It was survival. Proof that I had endured, that I mattered. Caroline didn't speak to me afterward. She avoided my eyes, clutching her purse like it could shield her from the truth. Her children clung to her skirt, confused, wide-eyed, and for the first time I didn't rush to comfort them. I let Caroline carry them out of the courthouse on her own. Days passed, and the ripple effects spread. The cousins who once parroted her lies grew quieter. A few even reached out, awkwardly, with half-hearted apologies. My aunt sent a text. We didn't know the whole story. I'm sorry, but I didn't answer. Forgiveness wasn't mine to hand out so easily anymore. Instead, I began building something new. I started small, moving into a brighter apartment with windows that flooded the rooms with sunlight. The first thing I did was place the file box on a shelf, not as a weapon, but as a reminder. I could protect myself. I even bought a new box, one not filled with pain but with mementos of my own life, photos, letters, dreams I had once buried under responsibility. Work at the library felt different too. For the first time, I had energy to linger after hours, talking with coworkers, joining them for coffee. My world slowly expanded beyond Caroline's shadow. I also invested in myself. I signed up for a night class in creative writing, something I'd always loved, but never had time for. Each week, I wrote pieces not about my sister, not about my burdens, but about me, my voice, my perspective. And as the weeks turned into months, something shifted inside. The weight that had once crushed me was gone. In its place was space. Space for joy, space for growth, space for peace. Meanwhile, Caroline's facade continued to crack. Without me to prop her up, she stumbled. Neighbors whispered about her absence at school meetings. Family members, tired of constant requests, began to distance themselves. Her empire of sympathy crumbled, leaving her alone with the consequences of her choices. One afternoon, months later, I found myself holding something I hadn't touched since childhood. An old ceramic piggy bank. It had sat in the back of my closet, forgotten, chipped on one ear. As kids, Caroline had always smashed hers open early, greedy for coins. I had saved mine, waiting. Now I cleaned it, polished it, and began filling it again, not with leftover change, but with $2 bills I set aside from every paycheck. A symbol of new beginnings, of investing in myself first. The piggy bank wasn't just a container. It was proof that I was no longer drained dry by someone else's chaos. I was building a life, coin by coin, choice by choice. Looking back, I sometimes replay that opening humiliation, the way Caroline smiled, thinking she had won, the way everyone else believed it. But now I see it differently. That wasn't the moment I broke. That was the moment I began to rise. And as I closed the curtains of my new apartment one quiet evening, the city glowing outside my window, I whispered to myself, this wasn't the end. It was the beginning. If you've listened this far, maybe something in my story feels familiar to you. Maybe you've been the one carrying more than your share, quietly, endlessly, while someone else took advantage. Maybe you've been silenced by favoritism or shamed by people who should have stood beside you. So I want to ask you, have you ever faced betrayal, favoritism, or abuse of power? And when the weight nearly broke you, how did you rise above it? Share your story in the comments, because the truth is, worth isn't something they hand to you. It isn't granted by applause or approval. Worth is something you claim for yourself. And once you do, no one can take it away.